Well, hello and welcome to the Faith Perspective here on Catholic SG Radio. My name's Andreacha. With me is Beatrice de Cruz.
Yep, and here on the Faith Perspective, we get the opportunity to discuss trending issues or events in the church and in the world.
Indeed. And
Yes.
today we're talking about the single life. While the church supports singlehood as a vocation, this is not the reality in the world, really. In some cultures, it's seen as being a leftover or an unwanted person, especially particularly for women.
Yes, and looking within Asia, in China, there is this culture of the leftover women, as Andre has mentioned, or 生奴. I don't know if I butchered that, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. So there's like this social pressure also for people to get married. And we see this quite evidently in Singapore, especially during Chinese New Year, when our aunties and our uncles will ask, "Uncle, Apoy, when you're getting married, right?" Yeah. So if we look more recently at Korea, also the government has begun to legalize marriages of individuals who marry themselves, and they call this
Sologamy,
right.
if that's the correct way to pronounce it, or
Yes.
autogamy.
Mm.
Yeah. So today in our studio to discuss what singlehood, first of all, is really from a faith perspective, we have with us Father David Garcia. He is from the Order of Preachers, or otherwise known as the Dominicans, and also Nicholas Gabriel Lim, a psychologist. Both of them are not new faces to Catholic SG Radio, but
Yes.
welcome once again, Father and Nick. Father, I think we're going to start off with you. So I'm going to ask you, do you think that something like what's happened in Korea, this sologamy, could be recognized or even legalized in other parts of the world? And where does this idea of self love stem from, really?
Okay, so I have no idea. I just heard of this or read about this in the newspapers, and I don't even know if it is a real thing or is it a legal thing? Is it recognized
now
legally?
it is,
In
yes,
Korea.
In
In Korea,
Korea.
legally.
Yeah.
Okay, that's scary. Okay.
Yes.
So I thought it was some kind of nonsense. I thought that we have heard everything about what is happening to marriage, but this is a new level to me. I honestly I don't think what we should make up of this thing, because it means that if you marry yourself and then you finally find somebody you like, so you divorce yourself first.
That's right. I wonder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why people? I think it sounds to me, as I said, I have no idea. It sounds to me like it's an Asian solution to an Asian problem. That many women feel the pressure. People are asking me whether you are married or not. So in order to give them an answer so that they stop asking me questions, I just marry myself, right? So if that is the case, I think it's an overkill.
Yeah.
I think you can just navigate those problems in an easier way rather than a legal way. And if it expresses that you love yourself so much that you have to be buried with yourself, I don't think you need that. So in the church, there is no way this kind of knowledge is going to find any framework.
Father, if somebody tries to push the scripture which says, you love your neighbor as you love yourself, would that be really pushing the boundaries?
Yeah, but you don't have to marry everybody you love, hopefully. So you have to love yourself. Yeah, we don't marry our parents. We don't marry
Of
our
course.
siblings, pets, or friends. So, yeah, marriage is a very different ball game. So, and I don't think this accounts as as marriage or anything closer to that. Yeah.
Right.
That's true. And as Father said also, marriage is a different ballgame. So we have to ask someone who is married, who is Nick.
That's right.
Yeah, and in your capacity also as a psychologist, what are your observations so far on the social pressures we experience in Singapore when it comes to getting married?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation once again. I mean, you always give me the hard questions.
Father, look at you.
Yeah. But because from the point of view of marriage, right? Everybody is different, and then my own marriage life is also very different, right? So we have our own pressures. Sometimes I wonder whether I go through the same thing as other families or marriage, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, but like for myself, I mean, both my wife and I, we're all working, right? It's hard to imagine, like in today's Singapore, that one of us is not working. You know, it's quite tough. So that's probably one of the pressures, having to deal with family life in Singapore, where everything is so expensive. And if one of us stop working, then we probably have to reevaluate our lifestyle and to see what kind of opportunities we can make available to our own kids. And some may have learning needs. I know my kids are not. Um, they don't know everything, obviously, so they need
Right.
I mean, parental support and obviously enrichment support as well.
Mm.
I'm sure families out there will also find this familiar, right? So that's one of the pressures within the family itself, the economy itself, how affluent Singapore is. I think also the other pressures that we face is so what families are around us are talking about what they should be doing for their families and for their own kids. What their friends are saying in school, you know, about how they should be working towards results and so on and so forth. My elder one is in primary six, right? And recently we are waiting for his results like next week.
Right.
You know,
Right.
already we are hearing parents, like we had a retreat last weekend. And we're already hearing parents just talking about, okay, what's going to happen next? You know, is he ready? Is he prepared? Prepared for what? I mean, like to us, my wife and I is like, uh, as long as he's a happy boy, you know, and he's able to comprehend and do what he needs to do in school. I mean, we are glad. Is there anything more that he should be doing? Right? And I think as long as he understands what he's doing and learning in school,
Right.
I think we're happy. You know, yeah. So these are the pressures that we are facing. Psychologically, as part of my work, I think I'm seeing more families also being, I don't know, what should I say, overprotective, over concerned about how their kids are doing in school.
Yeah.
Right? And they will come in and they will ask, hey, look, my kids are actually gaming too much, you know, and I think this is not good. Or they're talking about like, hey, they like each other and both of them are boys, you know, and they worry about this. Should I do something about it now? You know,
Right.
but how are they? Oh, they are like 13, like 15, right? Okay, I hear the concerns, I hear the worries, but they're 13, you know, but they're 15. Some even like they're like 10. Right? Yeah. So maybe they are really pressured about what modern society is actually making available to their own family and
Yeah.
kids. Influence of Western culture, you know, some more progressive than Asian cultures like ours. More so, I think Singapore is quite unique, if you ask me. Yeah, so there's so many lah. So I think for now I propose. I mean I imagine that this is something that we can just put on the table and we can talk about it a bit more later.
Right. Right. You know, we started off this program, you know, talking about the situation in Korea, very unique, and as father said, an Asian solution to an Asian problem. But for those who are single and who are, you know, actually happy maybe where they are right now, should they ever feel that they've been left on the shelf? Or are they sometimes made to feel that they are left on the shelf? You know, if they can't find a partner, a life partner.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel nobody should. I mean, everybody has a right to be with people they are comfortable with, especially people who they love and can connect with at an intimate level, be it emotionally, psychologically, you know, or even physically. Right? So I don't think anybody should be left out, you know. But I think from a psychological standpoint, I think there's, in my view, I remember social psychology. It's like interplaying at all the different levels. Right? In social psychology, we know there's the cognitive and interpersonal aspect of social psychology. There's the structural aspect of social psychology. There's also we call it the symbolic interactions. You know, what we do with each other that gives meaning to us, that helps us stick with it. You know, that gives us meaning because of these gestures or language that we use. So, like for example, the self-love. I mean, you probably could have come from somewhere, you know, and it gives them meaning. For example, I mean, in my line of work, we use self-care a lot. We use self-love a lot, for example, right?
Right.
Because that to us means that we have take on the emotional burdens of others as we actually work. So because of the extensive interaction with people, right, then we need the self-care lah, right?
Right.
And sometimes if we get a little bit more resource, we say self-love. Okay, let's go for a spa, go for a beer, you know, get a Rolex watch if I can afford it, kind of stuff like that, right? But if taken further than that, self-love, and that becomes something very affectionately used, and becomes like picked up, in social
Yeah.
conversations. That's the symbolic interaction I'm talking about,
Correct.
where social psychology is concerned, right?
Mm.
And then that becomes something an individual assumes. Then that's where the cognitive and interpersonal aspects of the social psychology comes about. Because like, hey, this can work for me. Hey, why don't I be using this, to basically help myself feel accepted? Or in this case, I read one article in the Straits Times. I remember they talk about, hey, if people stop telling me about whether I'm married or I have a partner, then by having to marry myself, they will stop asking me. That aspect. So
Yes.
they assume that self-love language, because it's affectionately used with interactions, but because that the cognitive part, they assume that to be their own, and because of their social interactions, it becomes meaningful to them. Because then it stops my parents, my relative asking me, and then they form their own worldview, their own perspective of life, what marriage is, what being together in family is.
Yeah.
So that's the social psychology in play, specific to the um, cognitive interpersonal aspect of social psychology, right? And then if more people subscribe to it,
Mm.
then the structure aspect of social psychology comes in, because certain organizations, certain governments may think, hey, okay, this is something a lot of people are looking into, and actually it values them. It's valuable to them, and they actually want this. Okay, then there's organized like a group of like self marriage together, and people take to it, and there's a requirement for it. So that's the structure aspect of social psychology.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Father, just want to ask you, just moving a little bit now, um, when you decided to join religious life, um, what did you tell your friends?
Okay, I don't think it's a very interesting question because I was have a very boring life. I was in the minor seminary, so everybody knew that I have one of my uncle is a Dominican, so everybody knew that I was kind of orbiting religious life from the very beginning.
Right.
So it was not a surprise.
How old were you when you, as you said, you were orbiting?
I entered the minor seminary when I was 11, and then I
Wow.
finished. I entered the novitiate when I was 17. So it's,
Wow.
Right.
so I don't think anybody was surprised. Yeah.
Mm.
Right. When your parents, I mean, obviously, they were surprised. I mean, they were happy, I'm sure, but surprised as well that you had at so young an age already been able to realize that that was the life that you wanted to live.
Not really. So my dad was a Carmelite until he left the Carmelites, and then so he's also very well acquainted with everything religious life and all that, and he knew that the moment I went to the boarding school, which they sent me, okay, so they knew that was a possibility, and they were okay with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been there. Yeah.
Right.
So my story is very boring. So
Well, you're here on the Faith Perspective here on Catholic SG Radio. Today, joining us is Father David Garcia from the Order of Preachers, as well as Nicholas Gabriel Lim, a psychologist in practice. And today we're talking about singlehood and the church's view of what it is.
Yes, that's right. So we have to ask Father now also, how we hear stories of many who are ready to get married to anything and anyone, in the name of like financial incentives, freedom, love, and human rights also, which was what we were discussing earlier on also. Could you share with us the church's view and definition of marriage?
yes, I think it's very interesting. The church's definition of marriage is that nobody can define marriage. So officially, the church insists that God is the author of marriage. And the implications of that sentence is that marriage is not something we decide what it is. It is something that it is a reality out there, and we only get to know it and hopefully to adjust our lives to what it is. So basically, marriage is a natural association of human beings, and like all natural associations, it depends on the nature of that. So how wolves associate, it depends on the nature of wolves, and they associate in packs, and they come described as what scientists know as a pack of wolves. Scientists don't sit around and say, let us define what a pack of wolves is, and we determined and we decide what it is. No, you don't decide what it is, you learn what it is.
Mm.
So that's more or less how it works. So every animal associates according to their nature. Wolves and lions and wildebeest associate different because they have different natures. And we have a human nature and we associate according to that nature. Of course, there is the culture factor which affects that. So we all have to eat by nature. It's a natural need, but how we eat is determined by culture. So
Mm.
what things you're going to eat, what is eating manners and all that, that is determined by culture. But culture cannot do away with nature. Nobody can say, okay, in our culture we have decided that we are not going to eat. No, that's not a cultural thing. You have to culture this determines how natural things are going to be fulfilled. So the same thing happens for marriage. The church doesn't say that her definition of marriage is better than any other definitions. It simply says that nobody should define marriage. We should all learn what marriage is and try to fulfill that in our lives. So that's more or less the. So, in what is marriage? Well, the association of a sexually mature man and sexually mature woman that determined or commit themselves to live together for life, with the view of open to have a family, to have children. That's more or less in the broad strokes of the idea that has always been in human nature, and that is what the church thinks is the idea of marriage.
Mm. Father, when it comes to vocations in life, some of us, of course, consider marriage or the priestly and religious vocation. How can the single life be seen as a vocation in itself?
Okay, that's also a very interesting question, because singlehood in the church has always been seen differently. So when Christians erupted into the Greek culture, singlehood in Greek culture was understood as a reaction to marriage. So in Greek culture, you have this moralistic dualism that the spirit is good and the flesh or material things are not that good, and therefore, if you need to exercise all your material needs, sexuality included, that is not as good as if you are independent, if you are free from that. That the flesh or the body is this jail in which the soul has to live and survive. But if you get rid of that, then you go to a better place. And interestingly, so in that with that view, singlehood is the rejection of marriage.
Mm.
So in the church happens precisely the opposite. Okay, so in the church, singlehood started as typically these very young women who also have this pressure: when are you getting married and all that, and they wanted to be consecrated to Jesus.
Mm.
So I always say that these women didn't get married not because they didn't like men, but because they liked men so much that they were only ready for the best man. So that singlehood in the church is not a rejection of a relationship; it's a commitment to the ultimate relationship.
Mm.
So in that sense, singlehood in the church, or virginity or celibacy, was understood, and Jesus speaks celibacy for the kingdom. It's not celibacy for convenience sake. It's not celibacy as rejection of marriage. It is a celibacy that complements marriage. So marriage in the church is a sacrament because it is not the ultimate reality. It is only a sign. A sacrament is a sign. You only have signs when you don't have the thing. Right? You have signs to, I don't know, CTE when you are not in CTE. Okay? Once you are there, you don't need signs anymore. So marriage in the church is a preparation for the ultimate reality, which is the church, the wedding of the Lamb, the whole church in this communion with Jesus Christ, right, in God. So that is, marriage is a good preparation for that, because nobody is prepared for marriage, and you have to change yourself a lot if you want your marriage to be successful. And that is what life is all about. Can I become a better person? And marriage is a good school for that. This is why, once again, it is the sign of that points or should point to the ultimate relationship, the ultimate marriage. And you have, on the other hand, these people who have chosen to attempt to live that reality here on earth, and also has its challenges, because that reality will only happen after we die, and it is very it's challenging to have a relationship with someone that is not physically present. Right? So there are two different states with different challenges and different blessings, if you want, but they complement each other. So married people in the church, this is why the church needs both.
Right.
So I think married people need people who have committed themselves so that they understand that the marriage is not the ultimate reality. No matter how perfect their spouse is, it's not going to fulfill them totally and absolutely because only God can. So they need to know that their marriage is only a sacrament. On the other hand, single people need also to understand that they are single or they chose uh, celibacy for the kingdom, precisely for the kingdom. It is not for their own benefit or their own comfort. If their singlehood does not try to live that relationship, ultimate relationship here and now, and they are not happy in that relationship, then of course it is not that what it means, what it needs to be.
Would it be correct to say that living every vocation is toward a sort of a fruit that needs to be born, in a sense?
Yeah, so everybody is equipped with the gifts, graces, and charisms for what they are meant to do. So that's why I insist. It's not a matter of comparing whether which one is more difficult. It depends. It depends on who you are. For some people, singlehood is very easy. For other people, it would be impossible. Same thing goes for marriage. So God empowers and gives us the gifts that we need for the vocation that we have. It's like I always speak about this. The different species are adapted to different environments. If you take a polar bear and you bring it to Singapore, it's not going to be very happy in Anchorage, right? Because it is equipped to be happy in the North Pole, right? And vice versa. You take, I don't know, a crocodile in the North Pole wouldn't be very happy. So why? Because it is made for this environment, and in this environment, it will be happy and it will thrive, right? So that's what we have to look at ourselves, see our charisms, see our gifts, see our capacities, and then look for the habitat that where we can be happy and thrive.
But earlier on, you also talked about looking for signs, right? And as a young person, someone who is discerning, and trying to navigate whether what their call is in life, how can young people look at our Catholic faith as a guiding force in that sense to help them look for those signs during their discernment?
Discernment is a very difficult thing, and you cannot just make rules for that, very general rules, because they are not going to be very helpful in the particular situation. So basically, it's like if you want to choose a spouse, you have to date a few people, hopefully, right? So that you can, is this going to work or not? So there is no substitute for the lived experience, and no matter how much thinking you do by yourself, you cannot imagine what the problems are going to be, or how is going to go. So you have to try. So do you have a vocation for the priesthood? Try a little bit. Go to the seminary, see other people, and you consider, okay, if the answer is yes, then you try a little bit more. Do you have a vocation for religious life? It was the same thing, right? You go to choose the order or the congregation that you think fits better your charisms and your gifts, and then you try. And if it doesn't work, then you move on and try other things. That's more or less the general rule. But as I said, you have to make decisions in the particular situation. But generally, I think so. Talking about this problem, I think the root, or one of the roots of this problem of many people being single today, is a fundamental approach to life that we have now that is very different from the past. And I think
Right.
that's the elephant in the room, right? So if you're a bushman in the Kalahari Desert, you don't dream. Yeah, it is very hot and there are many challenges. Typically, you don't dream in living in the North Pole. What you do is you think, this is my environment, this is who I am, this is my culture, my habitat. I will change myself to fit in here and to thrive here. That's more or less the by default kind of understanding. But today we have changed that mentality. So I think Pope Francis calls it the technocratic mentality, which is that instead of there is nothing wrong with me, I am. That's more or less the understanding. I am totally perfect and awesome, right? So if I'm not happy, it's because the world is not fitting my needs. And what does that have to do with technology? Is because that is exactly what we do to technology. So this computer is very good, but the next generation of this computer is going to be better. Why? Because we remove what we don't like. It is very bulky, very heavy. The battery lasts not very long. So we will change what we don't like and enhance what we like. That is the essence of technology. That's what made us go to the moon and come back. That's the technocratic mentality, the technological mentality.
Right.
But if that mentality rules our life, this is what Pope Francis calls technocratic. And now this technological thinking starts to rule your life, and I think that's part of the problem. People think about, I want to have my dream job, right? I want to find my dream spouse, and then you have all this list of things that you have all these ticking boxes there, and if they don't fit all these things, you are not going to engage in that. So that's I think part of the problem, because that is not life. You're not going to find. I think in Tinder they have this special problem, especially with women, right? So the first thing you put there, it has to be 1 meter 80. You have to earn so much and all that. Only 0.5% of all the men in that country fit that definition. So obviously you are setting up yourself for failure.
Right.
That's the why. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because you have these dreams that are totally unrealistic. And I think that's part of how sometimes women start to feel. You were talking about, do they feel left over? I think they feel, on the one hand, left over and guilty because they fear that society are judging them for being too choosy, and therefore that would be like, okay, you're too choosy, it's your fault, okay? So they feel guilty about that. On the other hand, if they think that they're not choosy, they think, but I am not choosy, I'm just reasonable. They also feel like left out. So how does all this, I think, how should we approach all this? I think the most important commandment in the Ten Commandments is one of the most important is the prohibition of idolatry. And we may think that, it's because God is so possessive and all that, and he doesn't want you to adore. No, it's a fundamental need in human life, that if we make our idols will never satisfy us. That there is only one God. God is the supreme good. The supreme good is called happiness. And we cannot dictate conditions to God, which means we cannot dictate conditions to happiness. The more you put conditions to happiness, the more you set up yourself for failure. Right. If these are, I can only be happy if this happens. I live in this place and have this house and have this spouse and have this exactly number of children, and they have to be like this and they have to be. The more conditions you have, the more unrealistic you are going to be. Right. So I always say that, okay, having dreams is good, but if your dreams become your exclusive obsession, right, they may become your nightmare. And I have friends like that who put all this. I have to get married, and these are all my conditions. Obviously, they never met someone like that, or maybe they met one, and it didn't fit other boxes, right? So eventually, they end up, not marrying anyone, and of course that's not an ideal situation. So the prohibition of idolatry is accept God as he is, not as you want him to be. And if you translate that into the business of happiness, then accept happiness as what it is, not as you want it to be, because you're not going to dictate that kind of happiness as well as it should be. So going back to faith now, okay, faith in the Judean-Christian tradition is an adventure. So Abraham is the father of faith, and God asked him, leave your place. He didn't tell him where he was going to go, what was going to happen there. There were no conditions. There was no plan and say, this is what I will do for you. Just leave your place. And I think the life is an adventure, and we should take it like that. So, which means, once again, you can have dreams, but don't be obsessed with the dreams. Don't make your dreams exclusive choices because they become your nightmare. Be open to whatever life or God throws at you because life is an adventure. The more ready you are to take whatever life throws at you, the happier you will be. So, in a nutshell, life is more about changing ourselves than changing the world so that the world fits us. The same thing for marriage. Marriage is not marrying the person you love; it's learning to love the person you marry. And that's what I think
Indeed.
is that ingredient. I think is very much missing in our culture because we are trained, but that you can do anything today. You are not a bushman in the Kalahari. We can change our lives. We can change our environment. We can change our gadgets and all that, and we demand all these things from our gadgets, and we project this kind of thinking into the rest of the personal lives, and we think that we should choose how many children we have, what kind of children that we are going to have, and that's another kind of mentality, another kind of thinking.
That's individualist. Would you say that's individualistic in that sense, Father?
Yeah, yeah. So today we are more individualistic than ever before, but it's not only individualistic. It's about making yourself the center of your choices. That everything has to fit me,
Right.
and I don't need to fit anything. And if you approach that, you have that approach in marriage, you're going to have a very troublesome marriage because nobody fits each other. There is no person that is compatible with you. You have to navigate the two incompatibilities together in a way that makes you better persons.
Wow. But I like what you said, and it's so true. It's learning to love the person that you marry. I mean, you live with a person for a long time. You think you know him or her, but you every day actually is a learning journey. And I think if we stop to learn, then we're going to get bored with each other, and then other problems could ensue as well. Nick, from a trained perspective of psychology, what have you gathered from what Father has said?
I was thinking if I had an opportunity to teach a class of people who are interested in psychology, specifically social psychology, I would borrow your entire example. About how Father was talking about Pope Francis's technocratic mentality kind of thing. That's a very good example of us talking about the cognitive and interpersonal aspect of social psychology. Once you begin to see yourself almost like technology, and you can change whatever that you like, and that becomes you, and it's your worldview. And that's how you interact with the world. That's how your relationship is like, and that's how you treat yourself, and that's how you view yourself, and so on and so forth. Oh wow! I would imagine that the world will be a very different place. Let's just expand that a little bit. If everybody thinks like that, then wow, I can't imagine myself living in a world that I'll probably be very uncomfortable.
Right.
If that was the case. But that is really the essence of social psychology, at the heart of it, where a person assumes a certain symbol, a certain knowledge, and then that becomes personalized. So, and then if you expand that out to like an organization, a country, and the leaders take that view, and then they implement policies, they implement laws, for example, then maybe that's why they have such a thing as legitimized marriage, because they take a certain view and that it's all right. And because that promotes certain aspects of society, then it's very welcome because all of them assumes that perspective.
Right.
Right. Well, uh, yeah, I guess it leaves us with us making a decision based on our values that we have, right? And what will work for us, and hopefully not at the expense of what we are meant to be, lah.
Right.
And not at the expense of the loved ones in our lives, our families. Hopefully, I can imagine if parents have a certain worldview, which is very different from their kids. If that was their kids' worldview, and then would there be a conflict?
Right.
Between one generation and the other. And how would they maneuver that space within their own families, not to mention community, and society at large?
So I think we in a sense, from Father's examples and what you've just said, also we sort of can draw some conclusion or some parallel, but not exactly. The individualistic person would be, as I said, the one who would want to control his entire environment and all of that, even technology and all that. But we also know that there are single people who have dedicated themselves and they have done so much wonderful work in the world. So how do you? It, is there a dichotomy, or is it the person's sense of self worth as well that comes in, or knowing that he or she is able to give back actually, rather than just being happy to receive, but is happy to give back and to see that when he or she loves in that sense,
Mm.
there is also fulfillment in their own lives.
Yeah, so my immediate response to that is that the psychology is also applicable in reverse manner, right?
Correct.
So if I assume a worldview of love being that of supporting others, it's not about myself, and everything around me surrounds that construct, that symbol, right? Then everything that I do will be different as opposed to what I was describing earlier,
Yeah.
right? And that would be applicable too, because that's how it works psychologically speaking, right? And then it will form its own unique culture on its own,
Mm.
right? And I think that's where the beauty of mankind is, because everybody would have different worldviews, different values, and hopefully those of us who subscribe to the values, within the Christian faith, will shine a little bit more if that was how they would live their life and how they are responding to the call of the Christian faith, right? And again, it'll be a different world, I suppose, a different space they will all be in. Yeah, altogether. Yeah.
Father, any thoughts on that?
Pope Benedict has a very good reflection on the nature of love in his first document, um, Deus Caritas Est, and he speaks about sexual love, erotic love, and many people kind of, even in the Christian world, have this idea that erotic world is like second class, is like very, very, I don't know, very, very biological, very, very too down to earth to be as lofty as charity, for example, or self-giving love. And he says that both need each other, and the whole picture of love is not complete unless you have both of them. And how he explains that is that in erotic love, you first of all you are attracted by the person, you want that person to belong to you, right? In a way, so it looks like it is very, in a way, perhaps even selfish. And he said, but that is not the reality, because if you are in a relationship, you immediately feel that you have to open yourself, that you have to complement that with self-giving, that you are not going to be with this person that you want unless you change yourself and you give yourself. That erotic love and self-giving love are kind of complementary and they need each other. On the other hand, if you think that you are in this relationship, I am only the person who has to give, in a way, it's an insult to the person, because it means that you have nothing to offer me, right? And that is not real love. That is also a kind of selfishness, masquerade as charity or very lofty kind of love you want, but it refuses to see the goodness and the dignity in the other person. So I think there's a very apt reflection that it is God has put in ourselves. This is why sexual desires in the human species particularly is so intense, more than in any other species. And because it opens us, it is like, so we have no excuse but opening ourselves to self-giving. That would be in a nutshell what I think is in the mind of Pope Benedict, that God has made us with these sexual desires so that we end up giving ourselves to someone, and therefore learning what it means to be like God, right? Which is the point of life. But maybe some people don't need that because they can give themselves freely already. So think about Mother Teresa and all that. So they are fulfilling the goal of sexual love even if they are not practicing erotic love in their lives, because at the end of the day, it is all about how you end up knowing how to give yourself to God and to other people, which is the meaning of life, practically.
Right. Wow.
Mm.
That's very nicely put. Thank you, Father. Um, you know, let's just come back to now singlehood again. When we first started Catholic SG Radio, we had, we were recording different prayers and all of that. And there was one time we had an email from someone who said, what, why are there, why is there no prayer for the singles? You know,
Mm.
and well, I mean, that sort of made us think a little bit more. Um, and we did find a prayer for singles.
Mm.
But from this point, there are many people who have chosen to live very full life as a single person. Do you think that the church as a community could support better maybe these people who have given themselves, as I wouldn't say laborers in the vineyard, but who have been very happy to and find themselves fulfilled as well in doing, the work for the Lord and for society as well. Could we be a better caring community, or how do we show our respect and desire to help these people?
The word singlehood comprises two aspects. So one is very different from the moral point of view. It's very different to choose singlehood than to be chosen by singlehood. So some people choose celibacy, some people are chosen by celibacy. So from the moral point of view, it's very different. So this is why we don't have a prayer for singlehood, because that doesn't tell me anything about your choices.
Right.
One thing, if you chose singlehood, then okay, that tells me something about you. It's like you chose marriage, is something you choose, but marriage doesn't choose you. But some people didn't choose celibacy; they find themselves celibate. So that alone is two categories in the church. As I said before, in the church, the category of people who chose celibacy for the kingdom
Right.
is it has a place in the church. It has been practiced. It has these characteristics and all that, and this role. Very specific in the life of the church, and therefore prayers for those people should be specific to that state of life, as it is called. The other aspect is, if something happens to you, then it's another kind of prayer.
Right.
You may have your own challenges, that, but it is a different animal altogether. So the two kinds of singlehoods are kind of, just because they have the same name doesn't mean that they are the same reality. So I think that's one factor. Another thing is that everybody feels excluded in the church. We pray for married people who have children, and people who have no children say, "What about us?" Okay, then you give blessings for I don't know, teenagers, and then the children feel excluded. Every time you include somebody, you are automatically excluding the rest, and there is there is no way of having all prayer for every single individual in the church, right? So I think the hierarchy of prayer is, we pray for the people who need it most. When we pray for ourselves, we ask God, okay, give me this that I cannot attain by myself. It is very difficult, and without your help, I cannot do. So I think that should be the rule that rules our prayer life, and that should be included in the church. And just pick your priorities. We are not going to pray in public for every single human individual in the entire world, because people have only 1 hour from us. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my life experience within the Christian community that I'm in, I think there are groups, the lay secular congregations, they do welcome individuals who want to find out how they could live their way of life. Even if they're wondering, there's also an opportunity for them to journey and find out. Right? There are also I guess ministries that will, reach out and do an outreach for them to invite people who are interested to live a single way of life.
Right.
I think these are existing in the church, in my limited knowledge, lah. Regardless of what your values are, or what you subscribe to in terms of, I suppose, how you feel God is calling you, and you're wondering, there are avenues like this. So
Right.
I've met people in our Christian community that have gone into these spaces.
Right.
Yeah, So I think we're no short of that kind of community and support groups.
And one such organization who will be organizing something upcoming in January is Catholic Family Life,
Right.
right? So they're having a conference, I understand, in January. That's end of January 2024. And this one is called the Family Life Conference. Yeah. So, as Father was also aptly mentioned just now, so there's, in Pope Francis's words, in our world today, there's so much discord and great division, and we are all connected, yet find ourselves disconnected from one another. So this is actually a great time to reconnect with our families,
Yeah.
to come together and really just unpack the challenges and opportunities of the modern family and building on resilience, understanding, and unity by integrating our Catholic faith and values in family life.
Right.
Yes.
So, I mean, our families today are, faced with many different pressures in society. And I think if we don't come together more often and if we don't also spend time as members of a family, whether it is my own biological family and then my Christian community and family as well, I think, it'll be difficult to learn and to know how to support each other as well, especially if there's an onslaught from the pressures of the world. But for that, we ask you to also stay tuned because we will get more details from Catholic Family Life as well as to. We know it's going to be happening in January.
Yeah, I've got
Right.
date actually, 27th of
Oh, you've got
January.
that. Okay,
Yes, yes.
alright.
So we can keep a lookout for more details. I understand also their registration is almost up and ready. So you can keep a lookout for that on Catholic Family Life website or familylife.sg.
All
Yep.
right. So today we've been speaking to Father David Garcia. Father, thank you so much for joining us. Father is from the Order of Preachers, or he's a Dominican, and also Nicholas Gabriel Lim, a psychologist. Both of them have been unpacking for us their observations, of course, on the perceptions of singlehood here in Singapore, as well as the Church's view on the call to single life and marriage as well.
Yes, and just a reminder, if you're listening to us right now on a live stream, the Faith Perspective goes out every week on Tuesday mornings at 8:30 a.m. with the exception today there is a special one at 9 a.m. But Encore broadcast is the same at 8 p.m. tonight and again tomorrow at 5 p.m. Thursdays at 2:10 p.m.
And also, you can catch us at your own time on our podcasts on the Catholic SG Radio app, on Spotify, or on iTunes. Just leaves me to say thank you very much. I'm Andre Acha. She's Beatrice de Cruz. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Faith Perspective on Catholic SG Radio. Bye-bye now.